is a Holocaust by any definition if you look at the deliberate attack on children, on women, on unarmed citizens.
The deliberate attack on women, children, unarmed citizens. Is she describing October 7th, 2023, when Hamas invaded Israel? It sure sounds like that. Folks, Steve Biko's Old Squeeze is telling us Hamas attempted a Holocaust on October 7th. No, her description of a Holocaust is a vile insult to 6 million Jews who perished in the Second World War. My sarcastic comment exposes her ridiculous logic in comparing the two. South African Broadcasting Corporation broadcaster Juliet Newell asked a legitimate question in an interview, one which seems to have gotten her into some hot water.
Dr. Mampele, I appreciate your sentiments on that. However, how does your statement likening the famine in Gaza to the Holocaust, do you not see that as provocative?
The conversation continued with Ramapele asking a silly question, exposing her lack of knowledge when she posed the following question.
The starvation, using starvation as a weapon of war. Tell me what that is.
And I'm happy to oblige her. Using starvation as a weapon of war is a war crime, not a Holocaust.
What provocative? It is a Holocaust.
But how can you compare them?
Why can't I compare them?
Because they're different. They are different. They are different. Why can't you separate them? And I'm not saying Gaza isn't horrific. It is horrific. But comparing them, and it almost undermines what the Holocaust was all about.
After radical anti-Israeli activists from a group based in the United Kingdom complained about objective interrogatives from SABC broadcaster Juliet Newell, the cowardly state-run propaganda outlet sacked her. Newell, who did not even ask any particularly provocative questions, kowtowed to leftist talking points and accepted the bogus genocide claim with no question. And she was still given the boot anyway.
I'm not disputing what you're saying, that it's not a genocide. I'm not disputing that. That's not for me to decide. The
presenter in question is currently not scheduled. Oh, wow. Talk about censorship, folks. The SABC added that its editorial policies were designed to maintain trust with the public. Sorry, trust. Folks, trust is not something the South African public has had with the SABC, not for many, many years now. And their actions here have only made things worse, giving in to radical activists over an interview that went along with the radicals' own claims. But they just took exception to one comment here. The SABC's editorial policies are aimed at building trust with the public and ensuring that our content in all its formats continues to resonate with the prescripts of our public mandate, and more so in providing universal access to credible content. Well, in response to the SABC statement there, all I can say is we represent the Lollipop Guild, the Lollipop Guild, the Lollipop Guild. And in the name of the Lollipop Guild, we wish to welcome you to Cloud Cuckoo Land. So, folks, who is behind this travesty of censorship? In an open letter, the Palestine Solidarity Campaign accused the SABC of biased reporting and sanitizing atrocities. Sanitizing its reporting. Well, that's something they've been doing, covering up Hamas's crimes for years. It's ironic that they're being accused of helping Israel here. So who exactly is the Palestine Solidarity Campaign? Their website claims that it's a community of people working together for peace, equality, and justice against racism, occupation, and colonization. Given that the Jews were there first and been there for 5,000 years, I'm really not sure what it is they've colonized or occupied. And since they're all Semitic peoples, I don't really get how you can be a racist against your own people. Well, you can, but let's go beyond that. They say it's unacceptable that a public broadcaster would consistently adopt language that mirrors Israeli talking points, using phrases like allegations of genocide or according to Gaza Health Ministry. Well, the allegations of genocide is a proper journalistic term because no one's been convicted of genocide here. It's their opinion that genocide is being committed, but the International Court of Justice has not made any such determination. They say they consistently adopt language that mirrors Israeli talking points. Has the Palestine Solidarity Campaign ever watched the SABC? This is comical to say the least. If anything, they're in the tank for Hamas and Gaza. Now, the group also criticized what it described as censorship and institutional bias. I think the censorship was firing Ms. Newell. SABC censorship has been very much in Hamas's favor. This is a case of the pot calling the kettle black. They went on. These editorial choices suggest institutional interference or censorship, shielding Israel from accountability and denying South Africans the right to accurate, unbiased reporting. Well, folks, I don't think I'm surprising anybody with this assessment, but the South African Broadcasting Corporation is not focused on accuracy, or that we've been more concentrated on exposing state corruption and South Africa's violent crime waves, especially the racial crimes directed against whites, coloreds, and Indians. But they're not. In its demands, the PSC called on the SABC to uphold ethical standards. As a publicly funded institution, SABC has a duty to report with integrity, accuracy, and balance. Well, I agree. And when farm murder begins getting accurate coverage on SABC, I'll consider empathy for the PSC statement. It is indeed the role of a public broadcaster to act with integrity, accuracy, and balance, none of which we seem to see. They say we call on SABC to accurately describe the situation in Gaza as genocide, provide full coverage of South Africa's ICJ case against Israel, and stop adopting the framing or talking points of foreign governments at the expense of truth. Well, the irony is that the SABC has been adopting the talking points of Hamas since October 7th, 2023, not Israel. And as far as describing what's happening in Gaza as an alleged genocide, that's because it has not been proven to be such a thing. Just because you think it is doesn't make it true. And listen, folks, I agree. We should have accuracy. Let's go back to the thousands of missiles fired into Israel. Hamas has murdered 1,200 plus Christians, Muslims, Jews, and Buddhist civilians in horrific fashion on October 7th, 2023. The Palestinian rejection of a two-state solution, which Ehud Barak offered when he was prime minister. The Israeli withdrawal from Gaza in 2005, turning it over to the Palestinians. And so much more, which the SABC never shares with its audience. If you want objectivity and balance, let's talk about those things. Now, Newell does not even argue and accepts the bogus claim of genocide against Palestinians. So she goes along with the propaganda and still gets sacked by the state-run media. Yeah, and PSC says that they're not objective, that they're attacking Hamas. That's comical. Folks, what does this say about South African Broadcasting Corporation's editorial board? Not much. Of course, few had any confidence in that bunch to begin with. Now their editorial cowardice has exposed them to even more objective viewers. Neither Hamas or Israel are harmed by this episode. However, journalism in South Africa, already on life support, now has the South African Broadcasting Corporation's editorial board also standing on the oxygen hose, cutting off your supply. More propaganda from a state-run media outlet. And you shouldn't be surprised. That's what state-run media outlets do. They carry the water for the government of the day. Otherwise, they lose their jobs. It's as simple as that. Objectivity is not something SABC is focused on. Or we'd hear an awful lot of state corruption cases. And we hear very little of that. You have to leave it to the private sector to cover that. As far as carrying the water for Israel, this is comical. Has anyone ever watched the SABC? No, they're not carrying the water for Israel. They're carrying the water for Hamas and the Palestinians. And to hear these people whine and make fraudulent claims because their feelings are hurt when a simple, honest question was asked and a propaganda response was given. And the journalist did not let the interviewee get off scot-free and spread propaganda. That's what journalism is supposed to be about. The truth, not papered over nonsense, which is what the PSC is looking for here, papered over nonsense, ignoring Hamas's murder, war crimes, crimes against humanity on October 7th. And prior to that, launching missiles and rockets into civilian schools, clinics, hospitals in an attempt to murder Israeli citizens for years, while the world sits by and lets it happen. This is not a pro-Israel stance. This is not an anti-Hamas stance. This is a pro-truth stance. The things I've said are true, objectively true, and provable. But the propagandists don't like the truth. You know why? Because they can't handle the truth, because it doesn't suit their needs. What say you folks? Cheers.